Well, a virtual study hall is really just the idea of taking what people could tend to benefit from um, in a study hall situation and putting that online. My thought was, if you come to uh, your home and you need to get some work done, it can be difficult to do that when you're just by yourself. A lot of us kind of tend to benefit in terms of motivation, really activating initiating those tasks by having other people around them that are trying to do the same thing. In addition to that, study halls are great in that you can really have someone else take the structure for you, right? You have a start time, you have a break time, you have a check in about goals time. We kind of monitor progress, right? So it's really very much kind of like a sprint workout for your brain.
So it sounds something like a virtual social space, is that right?
So if you walk into a library, you kind of get some of that effect. You get ambient studying and quietness going on, right? A collegial environment. Um, but you're not necessarily accountable to anybody, right? I actually found something that worked very well for me was going, and especially during the pandemic, going into, well, after kind of post pandemic, was able when I was able to go back into coffee shops, right? And I found myself like, oh my goodness, I'm getting my work done. Like everybody else was working around me and I'm working. What do you know? We're all working. And like I'll go use the restroom now, but don't worry, I'll be back. Right. Like you just it was and it's funny for me to admit that because I don't know, I kind of saw that the stereotype of the person working on their laptop in a coffee shop, right? But there is something, and then I thought about like French coffee shops and people having discussions and like where politics happen, right? So then I'm like, okay, maybe coffee shops, there's a thing about coffee shops, but the whole idea is you enter these social spaces and you have this ambient cumulative community effect that is geared toward whatever the space um, is intended for, right? So, like in a gym, you tend to not see people on laptops, right? Like instead, they're working out, and generally speaking, the whole environment and the current of that environment will gear people towards doing the thing that is more difficult to replicate by yourself in your home. People can do it, but again, it's kind of just these different environments for group motivation. So, in a virtual study hall, the idea is to try to bridge that gap. Like you might be in a private place, you might not be, you might be in a coffee shop or whatever, right? But the idea is if you sign up for this, you have that accountability piece to kind of help spark that motivation. But you also know that there are other people who are in there too, kind of similar to what a classroom can provide.
Okay, so in this virtual social space, who decides what you're actually going to learn?
A study hall, again, is more about you setting your own goals, and then we move you through. We take a break, we move you through, we take another break. And so the expectation is more like, um, setting goals for yourself and seeing on a macro level like what's happening to you as you work. Do you find yourself resisting it? Do you find yourself reprioritizing and not doing the hard thing first? Is that how it works for you or does that not work for you, right? So I kind of want an executive functioning piece as an effect of being able to participate. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. One thing I thought that was important about like, why virtual study hall, right? Is taken over from what I learned about in working in virtual tutoring, right? And that kind of environment. So I've done both where it's been like tutoring in a study hall setting with a face-to-face learners in a classroom, right? And I've also had the experience of doing this just one-on-one, also with group classes online, which is something you've done too, right? Working with other students online. And the thing that I took from what you shared about your experience was that there was a joyfulness to it, right? You took moments to have like poems read, people shared about themselves, and I found that that was a part of my one-on-one tutoring experience, but less so in a group setting. And I think that one of the things that study halls we are also kind of sharing is trying to kindle this a joy for learning, a joy for accomplishing the goals that you set for yourself, even in getting support in meeting challenges, right? And knowing yourself as a learner. So I think though that combination of like have fun as you learn is has a group of element to it. That's what I wanted to add. The virtual study hall, the idea is that, again, you're in your own home or wherever you want to be, so your access is super flexible. But you're bringing whatever you want to work on. Someone might bring their taxes to work on. Someone might bring a paper that they need to complete. Someone might bring you could bring a letter to the editor that you are working on. So we're talking about running the gamut of life goals. So maybe you're doing a college application because you're newly to college. Maybe you're at the graduate student level and you are looking at having to complete your applications for further education, whatever it might be. Or maybe or resumes. Maybe you need to prepare for your mock interview. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something to work on, and it's often going to be something that you don't feel as it could be as effective as doing this alone. So to that, I guess the whole piece about the idea of it being virtual is that we'd want to kind of talk about structure next.
Okay, so each one of these uh, sessions, a virtual study hall, takes 2 hours, right? And everybody comes in and does their thing. How exactly would those 2 hours be structured?
So those 2 hours would be structured, by I would encourage participants to show up about 10 minutes ahead of time or somewhere in there, kinda in those like, just before we get going. And that time we can kinda talk about, information that about the facilitator for a study hall, any questions you might have about the process, you can kinda use it to put in the chat and talk to the, kind of study hall tutor facilitator, and where we kind of get set up on what room or breakout room you would want to be in. Um, I would also use that time for identifying some SMART goals to set for yourself for the study hall period. So that's all kind of done in the first 10 minutes or so before we really get into the actual go time. Go time, as I kind of talked about before, I likened it to like mental sprints for your brain. We don't really want to go for longer than about a 25-minute period. That's actually at the long end of how long we would be able to really sustain good focus for, effective, efficient focus for. So the first sprint is going to be a 25-minute sprint, and the facilitator, study hall tutor person is going to time that 25-minute kind of sprint and then let everybody know when it's time to take a break. Our first break is going to be a 5-minute break where the facilitator will lead a technique, kind of like stretches, specific stretches, or participants can kind of get up, stretch on their own, and use the bathroom, like whatever you need to do. There's no have tos in this world, right? Um, so that would be our first break and our first round one. Our second round two is going to be another 25-minute push. At break two, I would say at that point, since we're about an hour in, that it's time to really use the restroom. If you haven't, get some water, get a snack. High protein snack is a really good idea. And then we're going to get in after that second 5-minute break for our round three. Round three is going to be another 25-minute push. And then break three is really focusing on moving your body. Overall, you've been working for an hour and a half. So it's a really good time for you to make sure there's more blood flow to your brain and that you're, making sure you're just getting up and moving around because you've been sitting for a long period. So it's a really good time to do that. Then our last push is a shorter push. It's going to be a 20-minute round four, so that we have 10 minutes to wrap up with each other, talk about how we did, reflect upon our study goals, those SMART goals that we set at the very beginning, and then kind of see where we got to in that goal set, progress made, and reflect on that process. That's super important for really getting a good understanding of how study halls work for you. where we were feeling our most effective? Was it in the first hour? Did you feel more of a push in the second hour? Did you focus on one goal, or were there several priorities? Did you find that you were like what was your level of fidelity to your goal, right? Did you set something and then do something else because you were feeling like procrastinating, right? Like all that kind of time in that reflection period, I think is the most important period where you really determine not only like, did I get something useful out of this study hall time, but what do I know about myself now as a person who needs to get work done? Like, what am I doing as I do this? So it's more of that kind of like metacognitive piece that is really important for being able to exercise your executive functioning skills.
So are there any particular ground rules like what if an emergency comes up or somebody knocks at the door, the phone
Sure,
rings?
sure, no worries. So a lot of those kind of ground rules for what the study hall looks like, and making sure you're kind of participating and contributing to a collegial atmosphere is making sure that you decide where you're at. If you want to keep your screen off and you want to keep your voice off, you can certainly do that. Best thing to do would be to kind of check in with the tutor facilitator and let them know, here are my goals. I'm going to keep my screen off and I'm going to keep my voice off. I don't care to participate beyond that. Some people will want to do somewhere in between. Some people are going to be in a kind of a really like high participant role and asking a lot of questions of the tutor. So in those kind of cases, especially if you've got different groups, one that may want to be quieter and one that might want to be more kind of back and forth discussion type, then we'll be using some breakout rooms, and the facilitator will jump between those two rooms, mostly probably in the more noisy room because that's where they're needed more, except to come into the quiet room and identify those break times and then lead everyone back to the main area where we can kind of do that again, initial check-in, any of the breaks that you care to participate in, and then that kind of reflection check out period. Um, if someone leaves early, certainly that's like best thing is, hey, I got an emergency. Chat to the tutor, let them know you're out of there, right? Um, and same sort of thing like during those mental sprint periods, if you have an emergency, by all means, go use the bathroom. By all means, to put out the fire in the kitchen. um, uh, if you have a someone, because we're working from home, so some people might experience like their child coming into the room and needing something right then. In those sort of cases, obviously, just keep yourself muted, and take care of whatever it is you need to take care of. Letting the facilitator of the session know whatever is going on, whenever you can, is really the best. And I think for that reason, that's one of the reasons why at the very beginning you can either put it in the chat for that Zoom session or just contact the tutor directly through a text or email.